Now let's look at money demand. For money demand, we use the theory which is called the liquidity preference theory. The liquidity preference theory basically is a Keynesian's view, and the Keynesians argue that when you look at uh, money, the reason why people demand money is because they need to have what we call a preference for liquidity. What is liquidity? Liquidity is the ease to sort of transact because you have cash in your hands. So we were talking about liquidity, right? So liquidity is basically the ease of transacting because you have money. Now, what is the price of holding cash in your hand? Because that's your liquidity, right? The price of holding cash in your hand is that you could have sort of put this money in a bank and you could have earned interest on that. So for us, when you hold liquidity, the price of liquidity is interest rates. And therefore, whenever we look at money demand and money supply, we look at it as interest rate as the price of money. Because if you are holding money in your hand, you could have given it to somebody on a loan, or you could have put that money in a bank and you could have earned interest on that. Okay, so this is why the demand for money is interest rates. Now when you look at the need for liquidity or preference, liquidity preference has sort of two reasons, or rather three reasons. Number one is what we call transactionary demand or transactionary motive for holding money. Number two is what we call precautionary motive for holding money, and the last one is what we call speculative motive. So these are the three reasons why people would be holding money balances. Let's discuss this in detail. This transactionary precautionary motive is what we call sometimes active balances. Active balances mean money very likely to be spent. It's the money that you have which is very likely to be spent because you are actively going to spend it. So what exactly is this active balance? So first let's look at transactionary motive. Transactionary motive is basically you are holding money to undertake day-to-day transactions, like buying your grocery, buying goods and services, and so on and so buying sort of petrol and or gas for your car, and so on and so forth. So this is money which you are keeping in your hand for day-to-day transactions. And we believe that this transaction motive can change because of two things, or two factors are driving forces for transaction motive. The first one is what we call nominal GDP. Nominal GDP means GDP which is not controlled for inflation, which means both price times quantity. So when the prices of goods go up, things become expensive, your transaction demand for money should go up because you have to buy more goods and services, same amount of goods and services, but at a higher price. Similarly, if the quantity goes up, again you need more money because your need for transactions may go up. So nominal GDP goes up, we say this, that transactionary demand for money may go up. Similarly, frequency of payment is the second factor. If frequency of payment, like salaries, go up, if frequency of payment goes up, people are frequently paid. Let's say if I'm paid a daily salary, then my need to hold cash in my pocket would go down because I know at the end of the day I will get cash. I don't need to carry around cash because of the fact that I know that I will be paid every day. But if I'm paid every month, then I may carry some cash with me, number one. Number two is this, that I have to go to the bank every now and then or to the ATM and get my money, but I will have enough money that can last me for a week or something. I don't want to go every day to the ATM and get money out. So frequency of payment goes up, we say that transaction demand will fall. Okay, So the first reason for us is basically transaction demand for motive, which is basically to undertake day-to-day transactions. The second reason is basically what we call precautionary motive. This is basically people are holding money balances because they are they feel that there might be a need for spending money on unforeseen events or unexpected bargains. So, for example, for a flat tire, for any visit to the doctor, suddenly all of that will require us to have some precautionary cash in your hand because you may need it for some bad time. And both of these together are those balances which you believe to be not too high. I mean, I don't expect you to keep a very large chunk of your wealth every day with you because you feel that transaction motive would happen. So these are small balances, not too high as balances, but they are very what we call active balances, both transactional and precautionary, what we call, they're very interest inelastic. So if I draw a graph, if I have interest rates here, and if I have your quantity of money, it's going to be very vertical, interest inelastic. And let's call this transactionary and precautionary demand LP1, liquidity preference 1. So if the interest rate goes up, you would see the quantity that is held by people may go down, because remember, interest rate is the price of holding money. So the cost of holding money, the opportunity cost of holding money will go up. However, it won't result in the demand to fall by that much. It is an interest inelastic relationship. And the reason why it's interest inelastic is because it is like your necessary spending. So you can't be worried about interest rate going up too much, because you know that this money you need it anyways. So it's a very interest inelastic relationship. So all the active balances, because they're very likely to be spent, they are very interest inelastic. Okay. The second thing is basically your speculative motive. For speculative demand, what I'm going to look at is something which is important to understand, is that before we talk about speculative demand, people are holding money balances sometimes because they want to buy assets, financial assets. And one thing we need to remember is that interest rates have an inverse relationship with financial assets or even bonds and securities. So when the interest rates are low, we'll find that the price of bonds or securities will be high. While when the interest rates are high, the price of bonds or securities will be low. And the reason is simply because if the interest rates are really low, and if you have a bond which is giving you, let's say, a good return, let's say bond aapko deta hai 10%, but interest rates is like only 2%, people will be demanding more bonds. When people demand more bonds, the price of bonds will be high. Make sense? Similarly, if the interest rate is like 15% and the bond is giving you 10%, then people will be rather putting their money in the banks than buying bonds, which would mean demand for bonds will be low. If demand for bonds will be low, price of bonds will be low. So that's why this inverse relationship. But this is an important relationship to understand the speculative motive, because when the interest rates are low, price of bond is high, a speculator is somebody who buys low and sells high. So from a speculator's perspective, he'll be like, oh, price of bond is high, let me sell bonds. So all the bonds that he had, he was going to be selling those bonds. And if he sells bonds, he will be holding a lot of money balances. So money demand or money liquidity that he would have, money demand is high. On the other hand, when the price of bond is low, this is the time he'll be like, oh, price of bond is low, I always buy when the price is low, and I always sell when the price is high. So when the price of bond is low, he will be buying bonds. And when he buy bonds, clearly he will give away all the money that he would have. So money demand is low. And that would explain why you would have this kind of a demand for speculative demand. Speculative demand, by the way, is also called idle balances. It's not like very likely to be spent money. Okay, so when you look at speculative demand, will have a relationship like this. Let's call speculative demand or idle balances as LP2. Idle balances means money not likely to be spent. So when the interest rates are low, this is when the speculator is basically selling bonds, and that's why the money demand is high. So he's selling bonds. On the other hand, when the interest rates are high, this guy is holding less money balances because he is buying bonds. Okay, so interest rates are high, you are at point A as a speculator, you're buying bonds, and when you buy bonds, you are holding less money balances, and that's why money demand will be low. Now, why does so it matters? Because this combined together, transactionary plus precautionary plus speculative, which is your idle balances, would be your liquidity preference or demand for money. Okay, so, and this is very interest elastic. And the reason why it's interest elastic is because we will be very responsive to a small change in interest rates. For us, speculative demand is when we treat money as financial assets. So, thoda sa interest rate change hoga, little change in interest rate, people will be cutting down on the amount of money they're holding if the interest rate is going up. Okay, so that's your demand for money. Now, to sum it up, just to one important thing is this, that when you look at equilibrium, money supply is fixed, because the government decides how much money to print, and then money supply can change when your reserve ratio changes, or when your banks are lending more, or for example your open market operations and all that. So I have interest rates here, and I have your quantity of money here. But money supply versus money demand is your liquidity preference. Let's call this liquidity preference not, which is your active plus idle balances. Okay, and this is your interest rate. So when money demand and money supply meet, this would be your equilibrium interest rates. Now, why do we call it equilibrium interest rate? Simply because if the price was not R0 but R1, if the price was R1, if the interest rate was R1, then money supply is more than money demand. Isn't that true? If money supply is more than money demand, people have a lot more liquidity, but there are not many people asking for loans. How do you then give people loan? You lower the price. There will be a downward pressure on price or interest rates, and then people will take more loans, and that's why the liquidity that you have, excess liquidity you have, the extra liquidity that you have, you will get that away from you. So अगर आपके पास ज़्यादा पैसे हैं, if you say more money supply than money demand, the only way you can make people take more loans from you is by lowering the interest rates. But what if this was the situation? I mean the flat part, but what if R2 was the interest rate? Now money demand is more than money supply. This would mean if money demand is more than money supply, then clearly people want to take more loans, interest rates will go up, and until we come to this point, X. At X, where money supply equals money demand, that is where the market would be at equilibrium. There is no tendency for price to change or interest rate to change. Okay, so this is the story for your demand and supply of money.